Do you want to know how to take pictures like this on your iPhone? Then you're going to want to stick around and watch to the end, because today I'm teaching you how to get the best iPhone camera pictures and shoot them like a professional, as well as how to edit. Yo, how's it going, guys? It's your boy Luciano, bringing you guys another one. Today, like I said, we're gonna be teaching you guys how to shoot professional photography on your iPhone. A lot of people are always concerned, like, man, how do I get into photography if I can't afford a professional camera like a Canon R5, like the one that I'm using right behind this? And my answer is use your iPhone. It's literally right in our pockets, and we can just take it out and shoot pretty much anything and have a very good quality similar to the one of a Canon R5. This is gonna be a little bit of a longer video, so I'm not gonna BS you guys. We're gonna jump straight into it and go with tip number one, which is gonna be our camera settings. Step number one is go to camera settings. So up here in the search bar, just look up camera, and it should take us straight to it. Our first thing that we're gonna wanna change is formats. So go into formats, and where it says camera capture, switch that thing to high efficiency. High efficiency will give us the best quality file sizes, so make sure you guys select them. And then second, we're gonna wanna turn on Apple Pro RAW. This is super important. This is probably one of the most crucial steps to this process. So make sure you turn on Pro RAW. This is gonna allow us to shoot in RAW, and I'm gonna explain a little bit more of that towards the last step where we go into Lightroom to show you guys how to edit. So anyways, then we're gonna wanna switch to 48 megapixels. This is gonna make it a lot easier in case we need to crop in. That way we don't lose any of our quality. So make sure you set that on 48 megapixels. That's also another very crucial one. And then if you're gonna be shooting video, then I do highly advise shooting in ProRes. Some iPhones like the 128 gigs might not be able to handle it just because ProRes is such a large file, but we're not gonna really focus on that today. We're gonna focus more on the photography side. The other thing we're gonna wanna change is preserve settings. So going to preserve settings, what this does is, let's say you're shooting a picture, you got all the right settings right, and your camera app crashes, or let's say you accidentally close out of it. Then if you have this setting selected, all the settings will remain the same when you go straight back into it. So some of the ones that I like to have on is creative controls. Exposure adjustment is a big one, so make sure you have that selected on. Night mode, if you're gonna be doing any sort of night photography, make sure you guys click that on. Portrait zoom, just go ahead and turn that on. Action mode, I have that off. Apple Pro RAW, huge one. Make sure you guys select that, turn that thing on. And then Apple ProRes, if you're gonna be shooting iPhone videos, go ahead and select that on. And live photo, that's up to you. That's also preference. On or off is all right. Another thing we're gonna wanna change in here is gonna be our grid. The grid is super important. This is gonna allow us to see our rule of thirds. I'm gonna be explaining more of the rule of thirds here in the next step, which is gonna be composition. So just make sure you turn on grid. Some of the people might get a little bit bothered by the grids, but trust me, it's gonna help you out a lot, and it's gonna take your photography to the next level. Now we're gonna keep going down here where it says photography styles. Let's say you don't want to shoot in Pro RAW for whatever reason, which I highly, like I said, I highly advise you do. The photography style that I like to shoot in is rich contrast. This is just going to bring up the contrast, make it look very sharp, very clear. If you want to do very little editing, I suggest you use the rich contrast photographic style. Another setting you're going to want to turn on is lens correction. This is very important, especially if you're shooting wide angle shots. So let's say you're shooting landscapes, or you're just going to use your wide angle lens. Sometimes those pictures will look a little bit distorted. So if you turn on the lens correction, this will definitely enable that, so that way your pictures don't look warped. That's going to be it for the camera settings. So make sure you guys have that all set up. One of the settings on there that was very important that I talked about was the Pro RAW setting. So make sure you guys have that on. That's gonna let you guys edit as much as possible and get pretty creative in the editing room. So let's jump into topic number two, which is gonna be exposure, composition, and lighting. This is gonna be a fun one, so make sure you guys buckle up. Some of you guys may have already taken some pictures on your iPhone. You look at them, they're a complete eyesore and they look like shit, right? So I'm gonna tell you why they look like crap. The reason why is because your composition is off. What composition means is the way that you set up your pictures in order to look pleasing to the eye or just make them look good. One of the factors that play into this is the rule of thirds. What the rule of thirds is pretty much a grid. If you guys remember, we turn on the grids in our camera setting. You have 4 points that intersect, and where these 4 points intersect is where you're gonna wanna place your object. If you take a look at this picture here of the dog, you have the dog placed in the lower third. This is being used as our foreground, and then the trees down below it are placed in the other third, which is gonna be our background. This makes the picture very compelling and it gives it a lot of depth. So another factor that really helps out with composition is called leading lines. Leading lines is pretty much just a visual element, and like it sounds like, it's literally lines, right, that give our subjects some depth. These lines can literally be anything from roads, staircases, branches on a tree, or even your arm. For example, if I have my arm out here towards the lens, this looks pretty pleasing, right? If I was to take a picture of it, it'd be a leading line. Another important thing that you should keep in mind is exposure. Exposure can really make or break your shot. Your pictures can either be underexposed, which is gonna be more on the darker side. You can sometimes see some detail, or your picture is going to be overexposed. Overexposed means that your picture is pretty much whited out, you can't see any details, your highlights are through the roof, and it's going to be a very ugly picture. Most of the time we want to shoot our pictures a little bit underexposed. This is going to allow us the opportunity when we take this picture into the editing room to bring back as much detail as possible. We don't want our pictures to be overexposed because we lose a lot more detail and it's a lot harder to bring it back in the editing room. So it's a lot better for us to take the chances of your picture being slightly underexposed, having some detail in there where we can just edit it and make it look beautiful. So generally our iPhone does something a little bit different compared to our professional cameras. The iPhone will usually expose to the whole entire scene. Versus our professional camera, you have to expose to your highlights. You usually want your highlights to be a little bit more exposed versus your shadows, you want them to be a little bit darker. That way you can bring these back while you're editing. This makes it a little bit tougher on the iPhone to get good pictures, but thankfully there's a little trick that I'm gonna teach you guys, which is called the exposure slider, which is right on your iPhone. So some of you guys may have noticed it already. When you go into your camera app, you're trying to focus on your subject and you tap your screen, there's a little sun icon that comes up. So if you tap that sun icon and you adjust that slider up or down, this is gonna adjust your exposure. Typically, the iPhone will automatically overexpose your shots, so you're gonna wanna drag this down a little bit, making our highlights a little bit brighter and darkening our shadows. Like I said, we want things to be a little bit underexposed, not overexposed. Another thing I briefly wanna touch on is lighting. I'm not gonna get too much into the nitty and gritty because I'm just gonna confuse you guys, but you can really get creative with how you want to light your shot. The cool thing is that let's say you're shooting a portrait, right? And you want this portrait to feel maybe more sad or more darker, then we're going to use little to no light. Some of the things that we can use to light our subjects can either be artificial lighting, which would be, you know, studio lights, or it's going to be that natural light that's coming in through a window. Maybe you want the scene to feel a lot more happy, bright, then maybe we're going to be using some studio lighting. One of the lights that I like to use for product photography is going to be these aperture lights. They're only about $30. They're pretty cheap. I'll link them down in the description. That way you guys can pick one up if you want. But those lights have came in really clutch. I sometimes use them for portraits. Like say I'm taking a close-up, I'll use it to light one side of the face, kind of like this picture here that I took. But yeah, guys, get really creative with your lighting. You know, create that depth in your shadows and your highlights. Play with it and have some fun. So let's jump into the editing part. I'm actually going to let you guys follow along with me while I edit this picture here of the Alani nutrition can. This picture is actually linked down in the description so you guys can follow along too, and so you guys have something to edit, or if you guys want to practice, this is a perfect picture to do so. Here on the very bottom of the screen, we have some of the things that we're mainly going to focus on is going to be our masking, our crop tool, our presets, lighting, color, and then effects. That's pretty much it. That's the only things that we really need to make major changes to our pictures and pretty much make it creative. So one of the first things that I like to do is I like to go into the crop, and I'll set this to 4:5. What 4:5 does is that pretty much brings us down into the crop for Instagram. This is pretty much the only crop that you need for Instagram if you're going to be posting on there. And then what I'll do is I'll go into my presets and I'll use one of my favorite presets, which is my CineSpace one, which is this one here. You guys are probably looking at this and now you guys can't see a picture, right? It's overexposed. So I'm gonna go into my lighting and I'm gonna bring down that exposure so that way we can get some more detail back. As you guys can see, we're starting to get some more detail. I'm gonna fix that slider a little bit to where it makes me more happy. I'm pretty happy where it's at right there. That's perfect. And there's no set number, guys, on what you should set your exposure to, your contrast. This is all preference, and get creative with it. Another thing that I like to do is touch on my contrast. So I'm gonna increase that a little bit. That will kind of brighten up our picture, as well as bring back some more detail in the shadows. And then our highlights, I actually like to turn down my highlights as low as possible. Reason why is because when you have whites, it tends to drown out more of the detail. For example, we have a ton of snow here. That's our main subject. Most of the snow is not going to be able to be seen if we take it all the way up like we did here. So we're going to bring it down so we can see more detail in that snow. Our shadows, we don't really have much shadows. Our shadows are mainly more on the left side of the can where the Alani words are. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. Whites, I'm going to leave it right where it's at. And then our color, this is another thing that I'd really like to touch on. I like to change the temperature in my pictures. So doing this, you either have a blue color or an orange color in your temperature. So if you bring it all the way to the left, that's going to turn your pictures blue. If you're gonna bring it all the way to the right, that's gonna make your pictures orange. Some of you guys might take a picture and you're like, wow, that picture looks really orange. All that can easily be fixed by changing your temperature. All you're gonna wanna do is bring it more towards the blue side like I did here. And I'm pretty happy how that color looks like, so I'm gonna leave it right there. Let's say you want a little bit less color. So maybe I want less blue, right? I'm gonna bring that a saturation right to about there. The pictures This picture doesn't look as vibrant now just because I brought down that saturation. Another thing that I'm gonna do, guys, is go into my masking. Masking is super, super powerful. Most of the stuff that I do is actually here in the masking tools. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this plus sign right here. And I'm gonna go into subject. This is gonna use AI technology to pretty much hone in and show us what our subject is, which is perfectly this can, right? That it just selected in red. I'm gonna go into my lights, and then I'm gonna bring up my shadows. This is gonna make our can look a lot more brighter. It's gonna make it be the center of focus, right? Make it be our focus point a lot easier. So I'm gonna bring up the shadow. I'm gonna bring up the exposure just a little bit, just so we can see more of that detail in the can. And I'm pretty happy with how this looks like. I'm not gonna tap any more of these settings because I'm genuinely happy with how that looks like. I'm gonna hit that check mark, that way our settings save. And then I'm actually gonna add another mask. So I'm gonna go back into masking, hit the plus sign again, and then go ahead and select subject again. You might be thinking, oh, we already did this. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna invert this mask so that way we select our background. Now we're gonna play around with the background. Like I said, there's a lot of white in here, and the snow is really drowning out the detail. The white is really drowning out the detail in the snow. So I'm gonna pull back the highlights all the way back. I'm gonna bring back some of the shadows, that way you can get a little bit more detail out of that snow. And let's see, and then I'm gonna bring up the exposure just a tiny bit. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks like. So right here, I'd be done editing this picture. I'm actually really satisfied with how this looks like. If you tap and hold on the screen, it'll show you your before picture. This is the before, and this is the after. Some of you guys might not be happy with this edit. I am, right? That's the beauty about photography. You can really do things however you want. Get creative with things, right? Have your own little touch and just get out there and kill it. That's gonna wrap it up for this video. You should be an expert by now and pretty much better than me. I'm playing. But on a real note, it does take some time to develop that photographer eye and just get good at it. It's definitely a skill that you need to build on. So make sure you guys practice. And I promise, guys, that your pictures will start to look a lot better than what they used to from the day one. If you guys did end up using that picture of the Alani can to edit in Lightroom, make sure you guys tag me in on Instagram. My Instagram handle's down here. So make sure you guys go follow me, tag me in your picture. That way I can check them out. And yeah, guys, thank you guys for sticking around. If you guys did find this information of value, please do me a favor, leave a like. Comment down below any questions you might have. I'll make sure to answer them. You guys can send me a DM on Instagram if you guys would like to as well. Don't forget to subscribe. We're gonna be posting more helpful videos like this in the future. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out, everybody.